In early 1942, Japan ruled the Pacific. After Pearl Harbor, the rising sun flag stretched across thousands of miles, from the Philippines to Indonesia, from Burma to the edge of Hawaii. No fleet on Earth seemed capable of stopping the Imperial Navy. At the heart of this power were its carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, four giants that had crushed everything in their path. Their pilots were veterans of China, their tactics unmatched, their discipline absolute. The Japanese believed the Americans were broken. Their battleships lay in ruins at Pearl Harbor. Their fleet was scattered, their morale destroyed. Even Admiral Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor, told his staff, "We will dictate the terms of peace in the White House." But arrogance is the first shadow of defeat. Because while Japan celebrated, America was already rebuilding, faster than anyone believed possible. In a warehouse in Hawaii, damaged American planes were being stripped for parts. At naval bases from San Diego to Midway Atoll, mechanics worked day and night. The U.S. wasn't planning a counterattack. It was preparing an ambush. And at the center of that ambush was intelligence. In 1942, Japan's naval code, JN 25B, was considered unbreakable. Every message from Tokyo to its fleets passed through this system of complex ciphers and number groups. The Japanese believed their communications were invisible. But in a small, windowless basement at Pearl Harbor, a group of U.S. Navy cryptanalysts, led by Commander Joseph Rockefort, proved them wrong. They had no supercomputers, no modern equipment, just pencils, paper, and patience. Working 16-hour days, they began to break fragments of the code, piece by piece. Rockefort's team discovered that Japan was planning a massive operation against a target referred to only as AF. But no one knew what AF was. To confirm their suspicion, Rockefort came up with a trick. He asked Midway Base to send an unencrypted radio message saying that its water supply system was damaged. Days later, Japanese intelligence reported that AF is short of water. The trap had worked. AF was Midway. Armed with this knowledge, Admiral Chester Nimitz moved his carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown, to intercept the Japanese fleet. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Navy would not be reacting. It would be waiting. This moment changed everything. It was not strength that turned the tide of war, but information. The Americans knew where, when, and how Japan would strike, and they were ready. At dawn on June 4, 1942, the Japanese fleet approached Midway, confident and unchallenged. Admiral Chuchi Nagumo, commander of the carrier strike force, had four of Japan's most powerful ships, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, supported by over 200 aircraft. The plan was simple: destroy the American base at Midway, lure out what was left of the U.S. fleet, and finish it. But the Americans were already there. Three carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, were waiting northeast of the island, hidden by cloud cover. Their pilots had been briefed with precision intelligence from Rockefort's decoded messages. They knew where the Japanese would be. They just had to find them first. At 4:30, Japanese planes bombed Midway, heavily damaging the airfield but failing to destroy it. Nagumo, thinking the Americans were still far away, began rearming his planes for a second strike. That decision sealed his fate. At 10:22 a.m., 37 U.S. dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown appeared over the horizon. They had come from the wrong direction, directly above the Japanese formation. With Nagumo's decks cluttered with refueling planes and bombs lying unsecured, the timing was catastrophic. In less than 5 minutes, three carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, were burning uncontrollably. Columns of black smoke reached thousands of feet into the sky. The Japanese naval doctrine, built on decades of dominance, collapsed in those minutes. Only one carrier, Hiryu, remained operational, and she struck back fiercely, crippling Yorktown. But by evening, Hiryu too was found, hit, and left in flames. By sunset, four Japanese carriers lay destroyed. Japan had lost more than its ships. It had lost its best pilots, its tactical momentum, and its illusion of invincibility. Midway was no longer a battle, it was a turning point. Victory at Midway was not a miracle, it was a sacrifice. Behind every burning Japanese carrier stood American pilots who never came back. Out of 47 torpedo bombers from Torpedo Squadron 8, VT-8, all but one were shot down. Their planes, outdated TBD Devastators, were too slow, too fragile, and carried no escort. But they attacked anyway. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, leader of VT-8, knew what awaited them. Before takeoff from the carrier Hornet, he told his men, "If there's only one plane left to make a run, I want that man to go in and get a hit." Minutes later, his entire squadron was gone. They didn't score a single hit, but they changed the course of the battle. Because while Japanese fighters chased the torpedo planes down to sea level, the skies above were left unguarded. That's when the U.S. dive bombers arrived. The sacrifice of Waldron's men gave them the opening they needed. They didn't die for nothing. The Americans also paid in blood. Yorktown, hit by Japanese counterattacks, was left burning and later sunk by a submarine. Over 300 sailors went down with her. Many were rescued by destroyers circling through oil and fire, pulling half-dead men from the sea. Midway was not about who had the best ships or fastest planes. It was about resolve, men flying into death knowing they wouldn't return, but going anyway. Their courage turned intelligence into victory, and that courage became the foundation of America's fight across the Pacific. After June 4, 1942, the Imperial Japanese Navy would never be the same. Before Midway, Japan ruled the Pacific. After it, they were on defense for the rest of the war. The loss of 4 carriers, over 300 aircraft, and nearly 3,000 sailors, including many of their most experienced pilots, broke the offensive power of Japan's fleet. It was not just a tactical defeat. It was a strategic collapse. Japan had built its empire on speed and precision, striking before the enemy could recover. But after Midway, it could no longer strike first. Its pilot training program couldn't replace losses fast enough. Factories couldn't match America's output. And its intelligence, once confident and precise, had been humiliated. The balance of the Pacific shifted overnight. In the following months, the U.S. took the initiative, launching the Guadalcanal campaign, the first American offensive of the war. Every mile gained after that, from the Solomon Islands to the Philippines, traced back to Midway. Even Japan's own officers knew it. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor, said privately after the battle, "We have awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve." He was right. From Midway onward, the United States fought with industrial power, code-breaking, and relentless pressure. The Pacific would never belong to Japan again. Midway wasn't the end of the war, but it was the moment when the outcome became inevitable. Midway was not just a victory of courage, it was a victory of intelligence. Long before the battle, the outcome was being decided in silence, inside a small, windowless room at Station HYPO in Pearl Harbor. There, a handful of U.S. Navy cryptanalysts led by Commander Joseph Rockefort broke Japan's most secret naval code, JN-25. They discovered that the Japanese were preparing to strike a location referred to only as AF. To confirm it, the Americans sent a fake radio message from Midway. "Our water purification system has failed." Soon after, Japanese intelligence reported that AF is short on water. It was the confirmation Rockefort needed. The trap could be set. This single piece of deception changed the Pacific War. Because of it, Admiral Nimitz positioned his carriers exactly where Japan didn't expect them. Midway became the first major naval battle won entirely thanks to information, before the fleets even met. The victory proved something new, that in modern war, knowing the enemy was more powerful than outgunning him. It marked the beginning of a new age, one where intelligence, communication, and code-breaking shaped the battlefield. Every radar ping, every intercepted signal, every cipher cracked. It all began here. Midway was not just the turning point of the Pacific. It was the moment the world realized that information itself had become the deadliest weapon. For the United States, the battle validated practices that multiplied force. Damage control kept ships fighting far beyond peacetime expectations. Yorktown had been patched after Coral Sea in 72 hours and sailed anyway. Her survival for most of the Midway battle forced Japan to spend its only clean counterstrike against a target that refused to die quickly. On the island itself, Marine and Navy flyers launched obsolete torpedo bombers and scout bombers that did not score hits. Yet their low-level attacks pulled Japanese fighters down and opened the vertical window the dive bombers needed. The cause and effect chain is tight and documented. Sacrifice created the gap. Dive bombing exploited it. Subsurface attack closed the ledger. Strategically, the battle did not end the war. It ended Japanese freedom of action. After June 1942, every major Japanese move was constrained by the need to conserve surviving carriers and pilots. Every American move was amplified by growing production and a maturing intelligence picture. The initiative line crossed at Midway and never crossed back. That is why historians call it the turning point. It is not a slogan. It is a schedule. Before Midway, Japan chose time and place. After Midway, the United States chose them. The legacy is measurable. For carriers lost in a single day removed the only tool that could threaten Hawaii or interdict the American supply line to Australia. The Solomons campaign became a grind that favored the side with more fuel, more airframes, and a faster training loop. By the time new Japanese carriers appeared, their air groups were green and their logistics thin. The path from Midway runs through Guadalcanal, the Marshalls, the Marianas, and Leyte Gulf. Each step required that the sea and the sky be held long enough to build an airfield, unload fuel, and move the line forward. Midway made those steps possible. The facts do not need decoration. Dates and hull names are enough. For Japanese fleet carriers destroyed on June 4th. One American fleet carrier lost by June 7th. Roughly 250 Japanese aircraft and about 150 American aircraft gone. An elite cadre removed from one navy and a validated method given to the other. A battle decided by intelligence, by a navigational hunch, by a 5-minute strike window, and by the willingness of men in slow aircraft to press home an attack they did not expect to survive. That is how the Pacific changed in a single day.